1976 was a monumental year in popular music, one of the best ever in the opinion of someone who was actively listening to and appreciating music in that year. And now it's 50 years later, if you can believe that, an entire half century. And so I thought we would take a look at some of the outstanding albums that were released in that pivotal year of 1976. Hey there, Swan Shadow here. Welcome back to the nest. Last year I did a series of videos showcasing 30 albums that celebrated their 50th anniversaries in 2025. These were all albums that were released in 1975, do the math. And we did 3 videos discussing 10 albums in each video. In retrospect, I thought that made for kind of long videos, and I get that might be a challenge for some of our viewers. So this year I thought we'd approach the project a little bit differently. We're going to do 30 videos, each focusing on just one album per video. And these will be quick hits. You can get in, get out, and get on with your day. It's not an original idea, but you know what is. As we go through these, please keep the following points in mind. Number 1, I've compiled this list entirely based on my own personal preferences. It's not intended to be a definitive qualitative analysis. In other words, it's not the best albums of 1976. It's not even just my favorite albums of that year necessarily. These are simply some records that I've enjoyed, some that stood out to me for one reason or another, and others that made some enduring impression on me personally. If you put together a list of albums from 1976, your list would and indeed should be different from mine. Point number 2, this list is not ranked in any way. There's no order or structure to this series of videos. I've chosen an all-time favorite album for this first video, and I've saved another favorite for the end of the series. But in between, it's going to be more or less random. Give you a surprise every day. And number 3, I'm considering only original studio albums for this series. We're not going to cover live albums or compilations or greatest hits packages at all in this series. So with that, on we go. Let's look at the first of our 30 albums that are turning 50 in 2026. I had to begin this project with the album released in 1976 by my favorite musical act. The Royal Scam is my favorite Steely Dan album, as you know if you've checked out my video ranking the studio albums of Steely Dan, linked in the description below. At least The Royal Scam is my favorite Steely Dan album on any day when that position is not occupied by Asia. The Royal Scam usually does get the nod though, because it kicks off with my all-time number 1 Steely Dan track, Kid Charlemagne. The blistering guitar solo by Larry Carlton just might be the greatest guitar solo in all of rock history. You could argue that point, but you'd be incorrect. Kid Charlemagne is, of course, just the beginning of the delights to be found on this album. There are at least 4 other stellar tunes here, including the brilliant The Caves of Altamira, a vastly underrated Steely Dan song, the charmingly tongue-in-cheek The Fez, the complex title track, The Royal Scam, and Haitian Divorce, which contains perhaps the most unique talk box guitar rendition in all of recorded music. The rest of the record is terrific too. There's not a bad track on this album, but those 5 songs are the real highlights for me. The Royal Scam finds Donald Fagen and Walter Becker at the peak of their creative powers. I really feel like this is the album that completely epitomizes what Becker and Fagen had in mind for Steely Dan from the very beginning. It just took them until this album to get 100% there. The songcraft just crackles with musical richness and lyrical depth. This is also Steely Dan's hardest rocking album from end to end. People that just think of Steely Dan as quote-unquote yacht rock really need to listen to The Royal Scam, because this album does rock. It's also their darkest and most mysterious album, although ironically, it's also one of their most accessible offerings. It's less smooth and less jazz tinged than the follow-up album Asia, but as is true of Asia, there's a host of top-shelf session talent bringing this amazing music to life. If you're new to the work of Steely Dan, The Royal Scam is an excellent album to start with. In fact, if I were going to give somebody one Steely Dan album to sort of feel out whether Steely Dan is for them, The Royal Scam would be that album. Because if you dig this album, you're sure to want more. And speaking of more, there are 29 more albums from 1976 that are turning 50 in this year of 2026. I can't believe I'm saying that we are going to talk about in this series. So come on back for the next one. Until then, be well. And perhaps now more than ever, please do well by the people around you. And in the words of that classic track from The Royal Scam, is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car.